Welcome back for another book review. This is the one that got the most interaction when I had and my husband had shared about my massive book stack that he helped me gather when we went to the library for the first haul of the year. And this was the one that on quite a few different places they were like, this book, I want to know more. And so here we finally are. It is The Horned God of the Witches by Jason Mankey. As I have mentioned, full disclosure, when I usually pick books, I don't look at a lot of things. I will usually look at the title, and that's about it. Sometimes I'll look at the cover art, but for the most part, I am just here for the title. And a lot of times, I don't look at author names, because if I did, I don't know that I would have grabbed this book, but that would have been a problem, because this is actually a really good book. But I would have judged it because I haven't liked his other books. I've read, I think, 2 others from him so far and did not like them at all. I've read articles from him, I think, in a few of the almanacs and stuff. Didn't really care for it. He's just an author that I was like, oh God. I had a feeling that it was the cover art is going to be gorgeous, but the inside of the book is going to not be. And no, actually, this was a really good book, and I had to humble myself a little bit and acknowledge that sometimes we need to not judge authors based off of their other work, even if we didn't like it, because sometimes you're going to find a book that they wrote that actually you like, even if you didn't like the other ones, and that's where we're at today. The brief description of this book is that while we have several books dedicated to various goddess types, the dark goddess or Celtic goddesses or whatever, or even some books that are on specific goddesses, I have one coming up at the end of this month just on the goddess Brigid, and I have several just on the Morrigan. We have these kinds of books really popular for the goddess and goddesses, but for the gods, it's really lacking. And there's even less, even just in the sections that you find in the major books that talk about the Horned God. He usually gets simplified and just brushed over. He's just an aspect of the Green Man. He's just an aspect of the god. He's just an aspect of the Holly King and the Oak King, and just gets really shrunk down into this itty bitty little box. And it's usually just maybe a paragraph, if that, usually a sentence about him. And here we have an entire book, and it really does go into all the details, and it is just amazing. Obviously, I'm rating this one really high. It was a surprise to me too. 5 out of 5. I know, a Jason Mankey book, yet here we are. So I have been proven wrong. He actually can be a good author. I loved this book. The other ones just didn't jive with me. That's the fun about reading. Sometimes certain books you just don't get along with, and then you read something else written by the author, and then you like it, and you're like, wow, that was a plot twist I didn't expect. So I absolutely loved this. The writing didn't match the rest of his other books. It didn't ramble, didn't feel like he was trying to do filler. In fact, it felt very condensed in a way that his other books have not. And it didn't feel like he was really reaching for information. This was a really well-written piece from him that I was not anticipating. Because again, I haven't liked his other books. Other people do. That's great. I haven't. I went in with really low expectations, and I was blown away at how much I liked this book. So it just goes to show, give books a chance. Even if it's an author that you're iffy, give it a chance. Once in a while, you're going to find a book that's amazing. So this, again, it did such a good job covering this topic. He goes over all of the different aspects of how the Horned God could be. He goes over Pan, Dionysus, Cernunnos. He talks about Herne. He talks about Lucifer. He talks about even John Barleycorn, the Green Man. There is so much in here. You even have the Witch Father. This was such a good book. If you are curious about the Horned God, you need this book. If you're just wanting a fun book, a book to just read, this is the book. It's entertaining enough to keep you going. But the thing that I really loved about this book is that he brings up really random but important points about gender and just the role that we've placed on the divine, especially in modern witchcraft and Wicca. He talks about it, and I love it. He talks about how, the Horned God has kind of gotten smooshed down into this itty bitty little role as just an aspect of the god. And he talks about, how the God doesn't have to just be like, you know, just this one thing or just an aspect of the other. Like, there's so many components to him, so many different aspects. Like, this is a really good book, and he talks about how he's not just straight, he's not just gay, he's not just anything really. And he talks about even, you know, just brief mentions here and there about like gender and, you know, the experience of women. And like, it was a really good book. I was genuinely surprised. I'm rambling at this point, but again, it's a good book. You need to read it. The intended audience for this book, honestly, is just about anyone who is interested in, obviously, the Horned God. But just like if you want to move into learning more about like the divine masculine a little bit more, I feel like this is a good place to start. Because as he mentions in this book, there's not like a whole lot of content for like, again, anything that's not straight. And this book, he goes into like, if you happen to be like a gay man in particular, this might be a really great book for you, because he talks about how like all of these different aspects and like different deities associated with like the horned god archetype are like great. Like it's okay if you're a gay man, and I know I have quite a few of you out there, so hello. Y'all need to maybe potentially read this book. I don't know if it's going to fit your exact situation, because like that's a really broad stroke, but like really you need to like give it a chance, because not a lot of books talk about it, and it's getting to be more popular. But he mentions how like it used to be still like a lot of homophobia in the like Wiccan and witch communities for a long time, because it was still like the god, the goddess, like you need to act straight in circle. And it's only kind of more recently that people are like challenging that. And like I've gone to rituals where all of the men there, and there was more men than women, they were all gay, and none of that was really represented in the actual ritual. And it just felt like really like, there's a word and I can't think of it, but like disjointed is like the closest word I can think of, where you're like, but it shouldn't feel like this. Like, if all of the people there are like typically going to be like part of the LGBTQ community, like why are we not representing that? And you know, there are so many deities, especially with the horned god in particular, that it's like, all right, yep, that makes sense. So like, if that happens to apply to you, this is a great book. If you're looking for a book that is more like LGBTQIA plus community, this is a really great option. He goes into it and is very like proactive, I guess, on like his verbiage and how he's talking about things. Because even when he's talking about sex, it's like, hey, yeah, safe sex, let's do that. Like the whatever deity he's talking about in that chapter is like, they support condoms. Let's practice safety, guys. And he's totally cool and like mentions like polyamory, but also doing things solo. Like, it's a very inclusive book that you just don't normally see. Again, a lot of times when we talk about like the goddess and the god, we really get sucked into like what this could be. And so I feel like this book would just be good if you are interested in the horned god. And again, if you are looking for like some LGBTQIA plus like content as a witch, and especially from like the god perspective, instead of just shrinking him down into a teeny tiny little box of sex, like there's a lot in here that goes well beyond that. Great book. Would I buy it? Absolutely. Obviously, I'm raving about this book for a reason. I highly recommend, if you can get it from your local library, read through it, see if it's something you like. Personally, I was really surprised, but I ended up loving it. As for like some other notes, I really only have one, and I feel like it is just like the best summary of how he kind of approaches a lot of this in the book. So on page 197, it's a long quote, so buckle in, guys. I'm gonna try and read it in one go. We'll see if I can do it, because reading out loud is my struggle of life. So he's talking about the Wheel of the Year, and he says, I find, and he said the common myth, but I changed it to the Wheel of the Year myth, to be somewhat troubling. Its limited scope leaves out the experiences of many witches who are part of the LGBTQ plus community. Don't we want to see deities who reflect all of our lives when we gather together in circle? Think for a moment just how disheartening it would be to never see yourself in ritual. As this book has tried to make clear, the horned god is not straight, nor is he even always a he. I always find the idea that a woman's life can be summed up in the idea of maiden mother crone to be a little too uterus-centric. Like I said, it's a long quote, But like, this is the epitome of this book because he talks about Ellen of the, I want to say it's Ellen of the Ways, but it might be Ellen of the Wild. But it's like the horned god, but the feminine edition. And it's like a reindeer goddess because female reindeer have antlers. And like, it's like the whole book, like, he talks about this in particular, just again, including the LGBTQ community, but also like that quote in particular, think for a moment just how disheartening it would be to never see yourself in ritual. I'm like, hell yeah, because I don't. That's why like I'm struggling so much with like this whole concept of what is gender in like witchcraft and like why is something masculine, why is something feminine, and like I've mentioned this one for years. Y'all who've been around for many a moon knows I hate all things uterus centric. Like the fact that it has to be motherhood through the ways in which your body creates a human. Like that's great. That's awesome. That's not for everybody. And like this, again, that line of how disheartening it would be to never see yourself in ritual. There are no people that I have found yet, except myself, talking about being an ace witch, being a demi witch, being demisexual. It's part of kind of the ace umbrella. And in the A part of the LGBTQIA, or the A, we have a few in our own little branch over there. And, that's never represented in the witchcraft community at all. We are completely excluded. Once in a blue moon, someone just throws us a bone. Like, oh, here you go. And then, like, you exist. But for the most part, we're heavily excluded. And then also, if you just take that part of it out, it's also really hard as a woman who identifies as a woman, who has all the bits and bobs of being born female and has to deal with the nonsense of it because uteruses are a pain in the butt. I don't care that it's supposed to be sacred. It's a menace to a lot of us. It's tried to kill me multiple times. I don't have a love relationship to that organ. It's so disheartening to never have a full discussion on what being a mother would be like as someone who doesn't create the child in your body. Like that is something that is so rarely covered, and like I assume it's kind of similar for dudes when you're looking at it, because like you're not really a part of that process. You're there for one part and then the rest is on her body, and then you're there for the aftermath. Like it's kind of a waiting period. And like as a woman where you know that like you can't do that for whatever like medical reason or choice or whatever, like we don't have that. It's not reflected anywhere in our books, in our religion, yet we're supposed to be so inclusive. But like it is really disheartening when you don't see yourself in ritual, and none of the texts talk about it because it is heavily like uterus centric. Like that line in particular just hit home because you talked about it's like, why can't it be maiden warrior crone, and why does it even have to be that in the first place? Because like there are women who are crones, so to speak, that are more young and youthful than some people like a fraction of their age. And it's like, yeah. But specifically the mother part really hit home for me because it is really disheartening that like there isn't like a massive discussion on like adoption and surrogacy. And even for dudes, like we don't have a big discussion on like if you have to go through IVF and if you have to go through like having a sperm donor. Like there's not a conversation really loudly going on. It's always the ability of both partners being able to procreate. And like you just kind of don't see yourself there. And there's not, we don't have a lot of like deities of like, if you're going to be foster parents, if you're going to be adoptive parents, yet the myths are there. We just don't talk about them. Like Lou was adopted and Caradwin gave away a child. Like it's there, but we don't talk about it. And I'm just like, anyways, that quote in particular, and I'm sure it's there for other things. But again, like I read that and I went back to thinking of the same group that I talked about earlier where it was a bunch of dudes and there was a few women, but mostly like gay guys getting together and doing ritual. And then in the ritual part, it was all traditional feminine masculine. And like the best they did is that they had 2 males on the male side of the altar and then they just had one of the female. But I'm like, why did that need to exist anyways? Like, why can't you just honor like 2 gods or 2 goddesses? And like some people do, but it's not very common. And again, all of us over here, and like why aren't we talking about like gender queer and like non-binary deities. Like, I don't know that I'm the voice for that, but I want to find that. Like, I want to find people talking about that because it's not talked about a lot. And I think we need to, even if it doesn't always fit for you, that's how all of the other people feel all the time, you know? Like, not all of us fit into, like, a traditional straight couple that has perfect ability to, like, procreate. Not everyone has that. There are so many things where you don't want to be parents. One or both partners aren't able to conceive. You know, you might actually just be, like, the same gender. And, like, again, like, it just, there's so many parts of it that you just get excluded. And yet we're really big and supportive of these communities. And it's like, but where's the representation? Where's the ritual? So anyways, that is such a side tangent, but that was my big takeaway from this book was I read that quote and it just has been lingering in the brain, just marinating. And even throughout the read, it was there. Various ways, just little hints. It was glorious. I loved it. So yeah, obviously, I liked this book. I do believe that is enough rambling for a video. I feel like I went on such a side tangent, but listen, it was a good book. And again, usually not mentioned. So I highly recommend you check this one out. Again, if you are wanting some LGBTQIA plus community content as a witch, this is a good place to start. It has a lot of good information. And again, if you're interested in the Horned God or just exploring like the divine masculine, the god in general, great book. I'd love to know your thoughts on this one in the comments down below. Huge thank you to my patrons. If you want to support me and get access to exclusive content, it is patreon.com/nightwaywithcrafts. Of course, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I post every single day, even if sometimes it's late, because right now it's 5 o'clock on the day I'm recording this, and it's going up the same day, so you'll see this in like an hour or two. But anyways, I'm trying to keep that goal every single day. So anywho, until next time, thank you so much for watching, and blessed be.